On day 11, we're going to be looking around Skagway. We will take the Lynn Passage up to Skagway and then take a bus up the Klondike Highway to Fraser. There we'll catch the White Pass and Yukon Railway and take it southward. Once we arrive in Skagway, we'll go back to Liarsville and have a salmon luncheon. And then we'll come back to the Red Onion Brothel and look at it before boarding our boat and heading down the Lynn Canal to explore more. During the gold rush of 1898, over 100,000 people passed through this area in 2 years. Some started at Dyea and took the Chilkoot Trail. Others started in Skagway and took the White Pass Trail. The Chilkoot Trail was steeper and harder, but shorter, and it included the Golden Staircase, people carrying their goods up it. Skagway grew rapidly. In August, it looked like this. By December, it had buildings, and within 2 years, it had grown into a metropolis of over 40,000 people. They supplied the miners with what they needed. They had to carry over a ton of goods Canada required in order to make sure they didn't starve to death up there. And the stores here were happy to sell it to them. Many chose the White Pass because you could use pack animals. Over 3,000 horses died in this pass. They even used oxen to carry up the 2,000 pounds they needed. And as you can see, the store owners became very wealthy by selling the goods to the miners that needed it. Their target was Lake Bennett, and then they were able to sail down the Yukon River to the gold fields. Out of the 100,000 that passed through this area, only about 20,000 ever actually made it to the gold fields. Later, Skagway became the jumping off point for expeditions into the interior of Alaska. As we enter the Lynn Canal heading to Skagway, we see the low clouds and it'll be raining most of the time we're here. Soon we're arriving in Skagway and ready to head out on our Alaskan adventure. We are still in the Tongass National Forest, and so we can see the mist rising from this rainforest. And there's downtown Skagway. It is not a very big town, but it looks much as it did in 1899. Here we're looking through the bridge observation windows. And then we get off of our ship and on to our bus. Let's listen to our guide.
This was the gateway into the Klondike. Even though this was probably the most heavily populated city from the gold rush, there was no gold found here. All the gold was 600 miles north. As we go through town, up here on the left, this Alaska Shirt Company. If you want a t-shirt that says Alaska on the front, but it's from China, that's the place. Affordable souvenirs. Over here to the right is a snowblower. That was the historic snowblower that would clear the pass. The last time it was in function was in 1995. And to the left is an old steam engine, engine 52. Up here to our right is the train station. You can see how it's not square, it's kind of curved off on this corner. That's because the train used to come right down Broadway and it would curve right around the edge of that building. And up here on the second floor, the protruding window, is where the dispatcher would sit, and he would watch for the train coming down Broadway. Over here to the left is the Red Onion Saloon. You're going to visit that a little bit later on. You can, the rates are the same, $10 for 10 minutes upstairs. Now it's just different services. Over here to our left is the AB House. AB stands for Arctic Brotherhood. There's 9,000 pieces of driftwood on the front of that building. Arctic Brotherhood was the oldest fraternity here in Alaska. They were designed to improve the morals of this city. There was, back in the day in the late 1800s, there were 45 brothels in town and 80 saloons. And so it was basically run by a bunch of 24-year-old men. So things got a little bit crazy. Up here to the right, our hardware store. This is a very small town, and so we have anything that we need has to come from that hardware store. Actually, their motto is, if we don't have it, you don't need it. So we have a Walmart that's 3 hours away. That's our closest big store.
Wow.
And so we do have a grocery store here though, so we can survive. So as we go across this street, I want you to look up on the mountain. You'll see a clock that's a mural up on the Curio clock. So if you notice, this corner building right here is the same business. That was a man went up there and painted the emblem, or his company up there as advertisement back in 1898, and they've just kept it up each year. We're entering into our financial district over here to our left.
Social house.
And we're exiting our financial district as well. So anytime you see a boardwalk here in town, that means the building behind it is the original structure from back in the late 1800s. So we're out of the historic district and we're kind of in the residential part of town. A home here, the average cost of a home is about $400,000.
Wow.
Even though there's not amazing homes here, it's just very limited. And during the summertime, the population goes up to about 3,500 to 4,000 people. And but during the winter time, there's only about 200 to 500 people that stay here in town. So it kind of becomes a ghost town for a little bit. But here in town we have one school, K through 12. Last year they graduated 3 people. 1 boy, 2 girls. You can imagine his prom. And then we do have a clinic right over here to our right. No doctor, just 3 nurse practitioners. And so if you need to have a baby, you have to go down to Juneau. You fly down to Juneau and live for your last trimester. Kind of put some perspective. We do have a grocery store in town. If you go in there and you want to buy just generic 2% milk, it's going to be $8.50. Or you can go to the expensive store. It's called You Say Tomato to our left. I say expensive. It's very expensive. You go and the gallon of milk there is about $12. Everything has to be brought up on a barge. So every Tuesday we get a new barge, or a new shipment of produce. That kind of sustains us. Over here to the right is the White Pass Yukon route. That's where they work on the trains. This is a narrow gauge train, and so a lot of the parts for it are very rare. So they have to, instead of ship them in, it's more cost efficient for us to just build them here in town. We're crossing the Skagway River here. You notice the milky, or this is not milky, it's just dirty right now. But usually, because we have so much rain, it's kind of made the water pretty dirty. But usually it's a milky color, and that's because of all the glacial silt. All of that is glacial fed, so 7 glaciers feed into that river.
They built it back and forth.
And we're out of Skagway.
We'll be riding a bus up the Klondike Highway to Fraser in Skagway. We'll sit back and watch.
It gets you in, it gets you out, and takes you north and takes you south. It's where I'm true north, strong and free. It's called the Alaska highway.
Soon we're entering into the clouds themselves.
On the Alaska highway, that's where I was raised. It's where I did a lot of growing.
Along the way, you'll notice poles that are hanging over the road. This is guides for the snow plows. When the snow is so deep they can't see where the road is.
That you take, a little piece of heaven.
So this waterfall here to the left is coming from a glacier that's up above. You can't see the Canadian border.
That's where I was raised.
We just passed into Canada. And now we reach the Canadian border.
The customs offices aren't right next to each other, but right next to the border. Because this is a very dangerous avalanche area. Over here to the left, we have International Falls. This is a natural landmark showing for the name. I know there was an author that came through here, and he wrote in his journal that he felt like God was tormenting him because the weather here is so severe. You can have 100-mile-an-hour winds at negative 80 degrees. And the snowfall up here, you get about 35 feet of snow a year.
In my younger days, Rocky Mountains and fresh streams, every corner that you take, a little piece of heaven with every mile that you make on the Alaska highway. That's where I was raised, and it's where I used to hang out when I was in my teens, heading up with the rowdy crowd to the hot springs. Just follow those yellow lines. Another long weekend in the summertime.
At Fraser, we'll go through Canadian immigration, and we'll get off the bus and on the train and head back south to Skagway.
Campfire with no guitar, and drinking out of a Dixie cup under the stars.
We'll be following this route south. Construction was begun on the White Pass and Yukon Railroad about 2 years after the gold rush in 1898. It was completed in 1899 and carried ore for many years. It finally shut down in 1982 because of the lack of business, and then in 1988 it reopened and reinvented itself by becoming a tourist attraction. Let's just sit back and watch it as the sights go by.
And if you can have your hats off, your sunglasses off, and when they get on, you'll hold your passport up to the left side of your face.
Life is like a mountain railway with its engineer that's brave. We must make the run successful from the cradle to the grave. Watch the curves, the fields and trestles, never fall. Throttle and your eye upon the rail. Blessed Savior that will guide us wait to join us in the parade forevermore. As you roll across the trestle, spanning Jordan's swelling tide, you'll behold the Union Depot, into which your train will glide. Superintendent, God the Father and the Son, with the heart.
Once we crossed the summit at 2,885 feet in elevation, the water starts flowing towards the United States now and Alaska.
Blessed Savior that will guide us till we reach that blissful shore, where the angels wait to join us in thy praise forevermore. In thy praise forevermore.
She's fast and she's sleek, she's a northbound. She's the engineer's love and his pride. Through canyons and mountains of snowbound, it's the great Alaska Railroad I ride. She'll be pulling out of Anchorage when the morning comes around, with her mighty engine shining blue and gold. You can see her passing by you and can hear that wondrous sound. She's a lady and a beauty to behold. Hey, she's fast and she's sleek, she's northbound. She's the engineer's love and his pride. Through canyons and mountains of snowbound, it's the great Alaska Railroad I ride. She was built by hardy sourdoughs who dared the wilderness and broke her with the muscles in their back. Though the wild and winter hounded them, they never took a rest until they laid their many miles of track. Hey, she's fast and she's sleek, she's the northbound. She's the engineer's love and his pride. Through canyons and mountains of snowbound, it's the great Alaska Railroad I ride. Tunnels and her trestles are a monument to man. You wonder how they ever got them done. But she's screaming up.
There are many waterfalls coming out of the Tongass National Forest that surrounds us.
Watch the lady run. Hey, she's fast and she's sleek, she's a northbound. She's the engineer's love and his pride. Through canyons and mountains.
Over there is the road we were using coming up to Fraser.
Oh, it's the great Alaska Railroad I ride.
I mushed from Point Barrow through a blizzard of snow, then out prospecting for 2 years or so. Pulled into Fairbanks, the city was a boom, so I took a little stroll to the mid-dog.
Skagway River has so much silt in it that it can't have fish. It clogs up the gills. So you can go fishing all you want, but you won't catch anything.
Was clear, the birdiest voice I had heard in 2 years.
Now we've gotten back off the train and onto the bus, and we're headed to Liarsville.
Met a man's blowing cold. When it's springtime in Alaska, it's 40 below.
Sorry about that. I should have warned you. I'm really loud. All right, folks. My name's Miss Annie Time. We're so happy to have you all here in Liarsville. So we have our saloon open. We've got cold Alaskan brewing, cold beers, red and white wine.
At Liarsville, they have rules. Dynamite and guns must be checked at the saloon. Keep your boots off the furniture. No credit. They buy gold. Please don't feed the press. Drinks are only served before, during, and afternoon. And remember, the ladies are business women. Conversation is extra.
Girls wanna have fun. Girls wanna have fun. Some boys take a beautiful girl and hide her away from the rest of the world. I wanna be the one to walk in the sun, 'cause girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun. That's all they really want. Some fun. When the working day is done, oh, girls, they wanna have fun. Oh, girls just wanna have fun.
And 3, if you do not like anything that I say or do during this show, if you have questions, comments, concerns, I need you to very carefully write them on the back of a $20 bill and hand them to me. I'll read them tonight at the bar. Thank you. All right, folks. So some of you may know this, but Liarsville was a real place during the Klondike Gold Rush. Back in 1897, 4,000 people called Liarsville home. Liarsville stretched from that mountain over there, all the way over to the Skagway River, up about a quarter mile, and down about a mile and a quarter. To give you some perspective, there were 14,000 people living in downtown Skagway.
Wow.
Now, nowadays, when we've got all of your boats tucked in for the winter, there's about 700 folks that live in this entire area. So, things have changed a bit. But back in 1897, when that steamer ship Portland pulled into Seattle with 2 tons of Yukon gold, well, the lower 48 got pretty excited because they were going through a recession at the time. So all the newspapers from all across the country, they sent their best reporters right up here to cover the story. Now those newspaper reporters got about this far. They took a look at that 45-mile hike up White Pass and said, I am not going to carry my heavy typewriter all the way up this. And another 500 miles up to Dawson City where all of the gold was. So they set up camp right down here, and they interviewed the miners coming down from the pass. Now the miners coming down from the pass didn't have any good stories to tell because they were the folks that had given up. And well, those were not the stories their editors back home wanted to print. So they did what any self-respecting journalist
Still do it
does.
today.
And they made it
Sounds like
Folks,
today.
it got so bad that people thought all you had to do to get gold up here was hop on a little cruise ship from Seattle to Skagway, take a nice little stroll up here, get on the escalator, go to the top of White Pass, get on another cruise ship eating 6 buffets a day up to Dawson City, hop off in Dawson, scoop up those nuggets, put them in your pocket, you'd be back home in Seattle in 12 days. Now there was nothing further from the truth because it was really rough going up here. A lot of those prospectors didn't know that the Canadian Mounties required each of them to have 1 ton of goods per person before they would even let them into the Yukon. If you are a single man and you cannot afford packers to help you, you can carry about 50 pounds at a time up the White Pass. That is 40 trips up and down the White Pass. Needless to say, most folks didn't make it to 40, and then they'd given up and all they wanted was a nice warm bed and a nice warm meal. Who do they run into at the bottom of that hike but the very same reporters who wrote the stories who got them here in the first place? And hence we were blessed with the name of Liarsville. Now, at the time you could have come across a troupe of traveling entertainers and they would have performed a vaudeville style show for you. So we're going to try and show you the same kind of show you might have seen back in the day. You can sing along with us. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamed I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. In all my dreams, dear, you seem to leave me. When I awake, my poor heart pains. So if you come back and make me happy, I'll forgive you, dear, I'll take the blame. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.
Many of the summer residents haul their campers up here each year to live in for the few months of summer they work here.
Yeah, I heard one move back there. Good. Excellent. Folks, welcome to the Red Onion Saloon. My name is Madam Anita Bush, and I will be your horror historian upstairs today. It is called our Bombay Room, named for the famous dance hall gal Bombay Peggy. It is not original to the Red Onion Saloon. This building, this room was added to the building all the way back in 2002. There's not much history in this room. But before we head up, I would like to give you some information about our first room upstairs. Now, folks, you are in the original Red Onion Saloon. Welcome. This building was erected in 1897 and opened as a saloon and brothel in 1898. Now, back in those days, Skagway here was home to 15,000 men and 300 prostitutes. Ladies, I don't know about any of you, but that's the kind of math that exhausts me. And my gentlemen, had you been one of those 15,000 thirsty miners in search of a good time here at the Red Onion, you would have walked in downstairs, bellied up to the bar, ordered a shot of liquid courage, and you would have noticed a row of 10 rag dolls seated behind the bartender. Now these dolls were made to look like the ladies working and living in the rooms upstairs. They matched in eye color, hair color, and the color of dress that she made. You banging already, madam? The dress that she may or may not have been wearing at the time. Now, gents, you would have chosen your lady based on these dolls and told the bartender which one you fancied. At that time, he would have laid that doll flat on her back, indicating to the rest of the bar that she would be very busy for the next 15 minutes. Indeed. What does one do with the other 12? The research is still being done, folks, don't you worry. Now at that time, that gent would have climbed a steep ladder-like staircase where he would have been met with a bouncer. That bouncer would have led him down a long, dark hallway to the room of the lady of his choice. He would have given that door a sharp knock. And the first rule of prostitution would have come into play.
Hi.
Welcome back, everyone. You gotta pay before you play up here in the brothel. So that gent, before anything else, would have handed over $5 in gold coins or gold nuggets. That lady would have tucked it away somewhere safe and then would have spent their time together. Now at the end of that 15 minutes, that gent would have been thrown right back downstairs. And the lady would have put that money into a small hole in her floor. This was called a money hole. And attached to that hole was copper tubing that ran all the way down to a safety deposit box behind those dolls behind the bar. And that copper was important, because that way the bartender could hear the clinking and clanking of that money. He could see a satisfied customer coming down those stairs, and he could look back to see which doll was making so much noise to stand her right back up to attention. Now, unfortunately, that copper tubing no longer exists here at the Red Onion Saloon. In 1980, when our current owner, Jan Rentmore, bought the building, she decided that a kitchen should be put in downstairs. That copper tubing would have created a lot of grease fire hazards. So instead, every single one of the floorboards you see upstairs was pried up and that tubing taken out. Quite a process, but a lucrative one. Because underneath those floorboards, they found items that those ladies had left behind 80 years prior. And we'll be able to see some of those in the display case upstairs. Any questions as we're coming upstairs, folks? So they are not the original dolls. The dolls here in the display case are dolls of the time, but they would have been using rag dolls. Unfortunately, those were lost to the test of time. So these were actually made by some of our ladies last season as a little bonding in the brothel. I see some people pointing some things out in this room that we have not talked about yet. The first being the knob and tube wiring on the ceiling. And you may be asking, is that original? It is. Goes to show how much money was flowing through these hills back in the day. Skagway here had electricity all the way back in 1898. That knob and tube wiring is original. And as you're looking up, you may also see some nail marks in the middle of the room. All found here in the brothel when we got in here about 40 years ago. Back in the day when madams were trying to recruit ladies to come and work for them, one of the perks of the job here at the Red Onion specifically was that a woman could decorate her crib room in any way she wanted, down to a fresh coat of new wallpaper, all at the madam's expense. In one room up here, we found 18 layers of wallpaper. We were only open as a brothel for 2 years. Multiply that by that 10 rooms, that is a very high rate of turnover. And that's for a few reasons, the first being the gateway nature of Skagway. The folks coming up here were just as eager to keep heading up north to Dawson City to get their hands on those golden nuggets. And the second being the very rough nature of Skagway. Due to disease and violence, it was not uncommon for these rooms to be vacated overnight. And we do believe it is that violent past of this town that has made way to our haunted present. That madam was taking a 50% cut of the $5 that the ladies were charging, and the bouncer took another 25%. That left those ladies with $1.25 for every 15 minutes worked, which doesn't sound like a lot. But back in those days, a lady working as a cook, or a seamstress, or a laundress here in Skagway could earn about $3 a day. They say the average cost of living in Skagway was $6. Now here at the Red Onion, if a woman worked her full shift from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. and had loyal customers, she could earn upwards of $60 in just one night. So not so much of a choice as it was a necessity for a lot of these gals. You may notice some things throughout the museum that are from a little bit later on in history. That is because we only served as a brothel for 2 years, and after that, the building was abandoned for about 14 years, and then we served as a union station, radio station, telegraph station, television station, laundromat, post office, gift shop, pharmacy, and a World War II Army barracks. So you'll be able to see some artifacts from all of those uses around the museum. And then finally, folks, when you make your way back around, you will find yourself.
We have now finished the last of our shore stops, but we still have much more to see. Riding the bus north and the train south showed you so much of this area. What you did in a few hours would have taken months in 1898. I also hear you visited the Red Onion and got some free samples. I hope they satisfied you. I look forward to carrying you into the Glacier Bay National Park tomorrow.
And this brings us to the end of day 11.